Today we're going to talk about where do you start, what do I need to start painting, and what products would I recommend. Beginner steps when painting. Hey guys, you're watching Squidmar Miniatures and I'm Emil. The last couple of months I've seen a raised amount of people writing and saying that they're new to this hobby or that they just got started and found my channel. And even more exciting is the people that just found out about this hobby through the works of my videos, and that just makes me super excited. So I felt it was time to kind of give back to all of those new people who came to this channel. So to help all of these people to get into the hobby of miniature painting with as little growing pain as possible, I thought it would be a great idea to make a video about how to get started with miniature painting. A video that I wish I watched when I got started with miniature painting. The first question to ask yourself, will I paint miniatures just to paint miniatures, or am I going to paint miniatures so I can play with them in a game? If it's the second one, you probably already have a couple of ideas what you want to buy. Maybe it's miniatures from Games Workshop, Star Wars Legions, or Dungeons and Dragons. If that is the case, I would recommend you to visit one of your local gaming stores and maybe ask them what miniatures you should start with when getting into your specific army. If you're getting into Dungeons and Dragons, maybe just find some cool characters to represent your character in your game. Meeting the cool people at your friendly local gaming store can really be vital to get into miniature painting and developing in your journey as a painter. If you're looking to get into miniature painting for display painting or just for the sake of having fun painting, there are hundreds and hundreds of different sculptors and miniature makers that you can look into. It doesn't have to be these super tiny ones, it could be larger scale like Black Sun Miniatures or some tiny dwarfs from some other brand. I will link to some stores for display miniatures in the description, and I will also link to two of my favorite stores for Warhammer and painting tools, and I will talk more about that later. There are a couple of things that you really need to start painting, and there are also some tools that I recommend to make your life a lot easier getting into miniature painting. I really recommend you to buy a spray primer. Primer seals the surface and helps to smoothen out uneven blemishes and increase the paint adhesion on your miniatures. What this means is pretty much that the paint will stick better to your miniature when you start painting. These can come in many different shapes and sizes, but one of my favorite primers is the Games Workshop Black Primer. And why? Well, it's just easy to apply and it's really smooth. It doesn't have overspray or give different textures to your miniatures. So this is the one I recommend to start with, and then you can experiment from there. But if you can't find Games Workshop in your local area, don't fret. There are, I think, 20-30 different spray can primers for plastic that you can find out there. And the second thing you need is quite obvious, you need paints. For miniatures, acrylic paints is the best way to go. There are many ways of going about buying paints and even more different paint brands, and which paint to buy can be really difficult to know when you're getting started, especially if you watched painting tutorials online before you watch this video, because most of those painters use 30-40 different paints in every video, and when getting started with miniature painting you don't want to burn a too deep hole in your wallet, so let's talk about what you really need. Since I'm assuming that you're just getting started, a good place to start is to start with the brand Vallejo. They have some really great starter set at a relatively low price and can give you a good variation of colors. If you want poppier colors, they have a set called Vallejo Game Color. But if you're looking into more natural colors, you can get a set called Vallejo Model Color. And these comes in different variations as well, but it's a good place to start. After that, there are more specific sets like painting skin in 100 different ways, and you can have German tank paint set, and all of those are totally valid paint sets if that's what you want to paint, but we're talking about a more generic thing that can help you paint a lot of different things. But because I'm a gentleman, I have talked to the two of my favorite stores and put together a special pack with all of my favorite paints. The paints that I wish I had when I started painting, and the paints that I use in almost every video that I do. So if you want to make things easy for you, you can visit one of those links that I put in the description, and there they have helped me put together a perfect start painting kit with brown colors, greens, blues, reds, orange, yellow, and just the colors that I like from different brands that give me what I need on a daily basis. But if you're not interested in ordering something from these stores and pick up something at your local store, as I said, Vallejo is a great place to start. There are other brands, but these are easy to use and easily accessible pretty much all over the world. And outside of these regular paints, there are also something called washes or soft tones. Different brands make these. Army Painter and Games Workshop are the most common ones. What these shades and washes do is that they seep into the crevices of your miniatures and create shades where you pretty much naturally would have shades. It's a very easy way of getting started and getting some volumes and contrast to your miniatures. The Games Workshop ones cost quite a lot of money, so my recommendation is to buy a couple of the Army Painter ones. In the kits that I have recommended, you have soft tone, strong tone and dark tone. But if you know that you're gonna paint a lot of purple, for example, or you're gonna paint a lot of blues, getting a blue wash and a red wash or a purple wash is a really good way getting these colors to pop and get more contrast. And the third thing I want you to buy is brushes. And this comes as no surprise, but what might come as a surprise is when you first start painting, I want you to pick up 3 different types of brushes. So the first brush that I need you to buy is a synthetic cheap paintbrush. You don't want a too small one, you just want one brush that you can use for metallic paints, for washes, for putting on base layers without worrying that your super expensive brush will break down after the first use. And any brand is pretty much fine. I ordered mine from Wish from China. It's like 12 brushes for $4 or something. But dollar stores or hobby stores usually have these cheap nylon brushes from Army Painter, for example, that work really fine for these purposes. I also recommend you to buy a dry brush. And a dry brush is a tool that helps you easily to add highlights to larger areas or to shapes that might not be as easy as a beginner to highlight with a normal brush. And the last one, and quite frankly the most important one, but also most expensive one, is to get a really nice fine brush. For example, a Kolinsky Sable brush from whatever brand that you prefer or your store has in stock. The reason why you should get one of these brushes is that the control and the tip of these brushes are on a whole nother level than the synthetic brushes. It will help make painting so much easier for you and also does way more fun. You don't want your first experience with miniature painting to be a struggle with your tools. You want it to be fun and made easy, so one of these brushes is a total essential if you ask me. Other things you also need. You need a utility knife or a hobby knife, super glue or plastic glue, a cup to rinse your brushes, a brush soap to keep your brushes fresh for a long time. You can buy a cheap one to get started and buy something like Masterson's brush soap longer down the line. Clippers to cut your minis from your sprues. And you also need a wet palette. A wet palette can be made at home with stuff you have at home, but you can also buy one. A wet palette is really an essential tool. What it does, it keeps your paint fresh while you paint, and if you ask me, this is absolutely vital for painting miniatures. But don't fret, I've made a video specially on this subject and how you can make one for free with things you have at home, so it doesn't have to become a cost for you. And once you're done with this video, that is my recommendation, jump directly over to that video and watch about how to use and how to make a wet palette. Most of the miniatures you buy today come unassembled on a sprue in a box like this from Games Workshop or in a box like this. But if you're getting into Dungeons and Dragons, a lot of the miniatures, they come pre-assembled and ready to paint just like this. But let's talk about this one first. The best thing to do is to cut the miniatures using the clippers a bit away from the model on the sprue. This is to not create stress marks from clipping it. And then go with the hobby knife and clean up any leftover parts. If your models have these mold lines from the manufacturing process, you can use the back of your blade or knife to scrape these off as well. Just be careful when using a knife. If you have a cutting mat, use the cutting mat on the table. Be careful to not cut yourself. Be careful, please. The second step is to glue the miniature together. Follow the instructions that came with your miniature to glue it together. If you buy super glue, you don't need a lot to adhere the parts to one another. And the positive thing is that super glue works with all types of material, whether it's metallic minis or plastic minis or resin minis. A small dot will be more than enough to adhere two pieces together, and you don't want the super glue to spill over to other parts of the mini because it can kill some of the detail of the miniature quite easily. Plastic glue or plastic cement, on the other hand, melts two parts of the plastic together and works perfect for models that are made out of polystyrene, like the Games Workshop models, for example. Once again, don't use too much of the glue, a small dot will be enough, and this glue takes a little bit longer than super glue to dry, so press the bits together for a while before moving on to the next piece. But once plastic glue has dried, the bits are pretty much connected for life. Once we've glued the miniature on the base, it's time to get the base some life. Today we're making something super simple for a beginner. I'm using some regular sand to create a scene where this mini is. I found this sand on a playground next to my house and just baked it in the oven for a while to kill all of the bacteria, and then sieved it through one of these to remove all of the larger rocks. I still keep these bigger rocks in a separate box if I ever want some larger rocks for my scenes. I use some PVA glue, or wood glue as it's called, to glue the sand to the base and let it dry for a while. Once it's built and all of the glue is dried, it's time to start priming your miniature. I like to place my miniatures on a stick, using some sticky tack or blue tack, but a piece of cardboard or a double-sided tape works just as fine. And now we need to shake our priming can properly. And a bit more. If you're using a cheaper can of primer like the Army Painter or some other brand at your hobby store, I recommend you to maybe put the can in some hot water. Not boiling water, but hot water for 10-15 minutes before you start the vigorous shaking. Time for the spraying action. Use a sweeping motion back and forth, spraying on your miniature. Start spraying on one side and end on the other side of the miniature. Don't hold the spray can in one spot when spraying, or you probably will overspray the miniature and lose the detail of the mini. When I prime my miniatures black, I like to do something called a zenithal spray. This means that I will be spraying with white or a bright gray from above to bring out some of the detail when I paint the miniature. This can assist me in making the highlights brighter, but mostly it's to make it easier for me to see where all the details are on the miniature. Where does his cloak end and where does the armor start? This can sometimes be a bit difficult to see. And this can be done using the same technique with just a brighter spraying can, or if you have, you can use an airbrush and spray maybe some white ink from above on your miniature. Finally on the painting table. I've got all of these fancy lights when I paint, but when painting your first miniature, don't worry too much about it. When you feel comfortable and found that you really enjoy this painting, a cheap way to improve your lighting is to take one of these lamps that you have at home, or maybe buy a used desk lamp and just put some daylight balanced bare bulbs in your desk lamp. And if you don't know where to pick out a bare bulb lamp, once again, I have sorted that out for you. On my website, squidmar.com, I have listed all of the things that I use when I paint. One of those things are obviously the bare bulb lamps. So if you go to my website squidmar.com, you can see all of those links to Amazon. And you can follow those links and just pick up whatever you need. And the good thing is Amazon also kicks a bit of money back to the channel, so it's a win-win. Some people like to put their miniatures on painting handles for a bit better ergonomics and to reduce the chance of removing paints by putting your fingers on a wet area or something like that. You can buy these from whatever brand you find, but for your first miniature, using an old bottle, some cork, a piece of wood, or maybe the lid from your primer can is the perfect way to go with your first one. It's time to put our first coat of paint on the miniature. I like to load my wet palette up with all the paints I will need during my painting session. This way I don't have to take short breaks when changing color when I paint. It just makes the whole painting session so much more fluid. Also, I like to have 2 cups of water when I paint. One of the cups will be used for metallic paint, so we don't get some of that metal pigment into our fine brushes, and the other one will be used for all the classic paints. When you're done for the day, I have a couple of things that I do. The first thing is to paint the rim of the base black. This frames the miniature and the scene that it's in, making the miniature pop and separate the world it's in from the plastic surrounding it, and yeah, as I said, it just really makes the miniatures pop. So I always recommend a black rim on the base. Always, like always a black rim on the base. The second thing I do is to clean my brushes. A brush soap is a low-cost cleaning tool that makes your more expensive brushes last a lot longer. I like to use mine as much as possible though, because it keeps my brushes really fresh. I just dip my brush in the water and move the brush in the direction of the hairs backwards while spinning it on the soap. I then remove the soap from the brush by stirring it in the water again and just repeating until the brush is completely clean. And when I've done this enough times so that no more paint is being removed from the brush while using the soap, I just use the palm of my hand to reshape the brush into that super fine tip that it had when I got it. And if I do this frequently, my brushes stay super fresh for a very long time, and you want to do that too. I also get this question from time to time: what do you do when you've painted your miniatures? I heard that people add like a transparent layer of paint on it, or some people ask me if I use some varnish to seal the miniature, and the honest answer is I've never used varnish. It doesn't matter which varnish you have, it's going to change the sheen of your miniature. But the problem is I lose the properties of the paints that I've been using. So for example, if I use the wash, it might have a bit more of a sheen than the regular paints, or if I'm using an ink for something, it has even more of that. And if I varnish something, doesn't matter if it's matte varnish or gloss varnish, it's going to remove some of that effect. And I just want to keep my miniature the way it is. And unless you're painting metal miniatures, I don't think you need to use a varnish. But do it if you feel like you want to. So friends, I know that it's been a lot to take in if you're new to miniature painting, but don't worry. As I said, I've gone together with two of my favorite stores, Elemental Games from UK, they ship worldwide, and we put together a start painting set, Squidmar start painting set, with all of the paints that I use, as I said. And I also talked to my local gaming store, Fantasia North, and we put together a box with them, and they ship all over EU. So if you're getting started with miniature painting, visit one of these stores and get a discounted box with all of the things that I use that I feel you need to get started. Maybe pick up a Warhammer box or some figures to paint from there as well when you're at it. If you do, you get a good price, and once again, they will kick back some money to this channel to support me for what I do. So this is really a win-win. You get a really good box with all of the paints that I like and all the tools you need, a complete start painting kit. Everybody wins! If you feel like you want to order from Amazon, as I said, I have all of those links on my website, squidmar.com. If you click on any of those links and purchase something, I think it's 30 minutes or an hour from when you click the link, this channel gets a kickback from Amazon. So another great way of everybody winning. If you liked this video and felt like you learned something, you can press the like button, maybe leave a comment and tell me how pretty my microphone is or something. Feel free to ask anything if you have any questions. And if you feel like you have just way too much money and you need to support this channel even more, I have a Patreon. You can go there and pledge a few dollars, and with that also comes the awesome reward of joining my Discord chat. We are 190 different people now, I think, talking every day about miniature painting, war games, hobby, life. I would like to send out a special thanks to my top Patreon supporters, Albin Ostrom, Evan Weston, and Russ Prentice. You guys are awesome. Thanks so much. I think that's all for today. I hope this video helped you. Have a great day.